Hi, I'm Seth, and I have millions of servants at my disposal. I mean, they're microbes, but still. Welcome to the good world.
1, 2, 3.
So come on into a place that is fun. I'll be your friend and you can be mine. The world is a stream of constant bullshit, but that doesn't mean there's not a whole lot of good shit. You start with the lean and we can make something different. Let's build a world that is good.
This is a show for adults. Hi, friends. Welcome to the good world. My name is Seth. I am your host. Thank you so much for being here today. So a quick housekeeping note. Up until this point, I've been doing episodes Mondays and Thursdays. I'm trying to find a job. I'm trying to figure a bunch of things out. So I'm going to downshift for those of us who have driven manual cars, which maybe suggest I'm a little old. I'm going to downshift to one episode a week instead of two. I hope that's okay. It's a fair amount of work and a fair amount of time, and I love making these, but also I need to find an income, so I'm going to work on that. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today, microbes. So right now, in my kitchen, we have 3 different projects going. I say we because it's me and Susie, and each of us sort of has their own different parts of this. But we have 3 projects going that involve using microbes to make things. And something that I didn't really appreciate until I sort of started doing it myself and started looking into the processes involved here is the way that we as a species, we humans, are able to use really, really tiny living creatures. They're so tiny we can't even see them to effectively do work for us, but it's almost magic, right? So the examples that we have going on in our house right now, one, I have recently started making yogurt. We have an Instant Pot. It's great. I get some milk. I ultra pasteurize the milk to kill off all the microbes in it that are there, and then I cool it down, and then I add some microbes from a culture, and then let it sit for 8 to 12 hours, and then I have yogurt. And it's just crazy. That's like how that works. And historically, it's only a pretty new thing that you get powdered cultures to make yogurt with, which I have. But for most of human history, people were just using the naturally occurring bacteria inside the milk. That's actually how you make yogurt. It's how you make fresh cheese. There are all kinds of things you can do with that. And that's kind of crazy, right? It's just these teeny tiny little, like, we cannot see them with our eyes. I think you can probably see them with a microscope. I'm honestly not even sure. But we're basically farming these teeny tiny little creatures, and what they do is they eat the milk and then they digest it, and sort of functionally they poop out yogurt is like how the process works for us. But we cultivate these little creatures because their life process, where they eat milk and then digest it, makes the milk more delicious to us. Also, in a lot of ways, makes it healthier to us, right? There are all kinds of good, healthy bacteria in yogurt, and that's just a lot of teeny tiny little creatures doing that. Another project we have going, well, a project that Susie has had going actually for longer than we have been together, and we're over 9 years now. We will have been together for 10 years in November. So at the end of this year, we'll have been together 10 years. And Susie has been making sourdough since before she and I met, by like several years. And there was a kind of funny thing, like in the days of lockdown, you may remember sourdough became a very, very popular thing, and all these people discovered that they could make sourdough. And Susie was like, yeah, I've been doing that for a long time. She's very, very good at it. She makes fantastic, I was going to say fantastic bread, but it's also not just bread. She has made bagels that come out really good. She's made different kinds of bread also, like flatbreads and pizza dough. She makes all kinds of things, and it's all really, really good. And again, it's different microbes, but it is the same process of using lots of teeny tiny little creatures that we can't even see, and you're feeding them flour and water and they just live in the air. When you make a sourdough starter, literally, historically, the way to do it, I mean, people now can propagate it from, in the same way I can get cultures to make yogurt, you can buy like powdered dried yeast and that'll sort of activate. But the traditional way of creating a sourdough starter is you just put out some flour and water and you just wait for a little while, and then all of these microbes, these yeasts that are floating around in the air, we're breathing them all the time. We can't see them, but there are millions of them all around me right here. And they land on the flour and the water and they're like, ooh, food. And so they start eating the flour water mixture. And it's more or less, by the way, I am not a scientific expert in any of these things, so I am distilling these down to a very, very rudimentary understanding. But effectively, they're eating little bits of flour, and their digestion process, again, I used the phrase they're pooping it out, but that implies that they have a butt, and they don't even have butts. They just kind of secrete. They ingest things and they secrete things. They don't have mouths or butts. They're not tubes like us. Humans are tubes, right? We're tubes. We have a mouth at the end, and then stuff goes all the way through and comes out your butt. So we're a tube. We're a weirdly shaped tube, but we're a tube. These microbes that make sourdough starter and that make yogurt are not tubes. They're just, I think they have membranes, but basically, so they're taking in the flour and then they're kind of secreting what turns into sourdough starter and has gluten and all of these structures that you can then use to turn into bread. And it does all kinds of weird things to the proteins. That's also what happens with yogurt, is it just does all kinds of weird things to the proteins. And so it's this same process. You are farming millions of teeny tiny little invisible things, and you're feeding them water and flour, and they make the water and flour into something more delicious than it already is. Right? Water and flour on their own is not that interesting. But if you give it microbes and time and also salt, you get bread. And I love bread. Bread is really delicious. So again, that's just another incredible thing. I said we have 3 projects going. The third project, so when you make yogurt, you end up, at least if you strain the yogurt, which I've been doing to make more of a Greek, like a thick yogurt, you end up with whey, W-H-E-Y, like little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey, old nursery rhyme. Again, I might be dating myself, but I'm not old enough to like when it was originally from. But I don't know if that's a thing that parents are saying to their kids anymore. But Little Miss Muffet eating her curds and whey. Curds and whey are when you make cheese, like cottage cheese, it separates into sort of clumps. That's what the curds are, the cheese curds. And then the whey is sort of the liquid that gets left over after it. And it's a very yellow liquid. There are 2 different kinds of whey. So if you're making cheese, you end up with what's called sweet whey. And that's what like protein powder is made from. Whey protein powder comes from that. Also, Little Miss Muffet eating her curds and whey would be eating that kind of whey. Sour whey or acid whey, which is what happens when you make yogurt, is a different product, and it has a lot of microbes in it also, because it's what's left over after the microbes made the yogurt, but it does not have the same amount of protein and sort of other health benefits. So you can't use it the same way you use sweet whey. But what you can do, and what we are doing in our kitchen right now, is you can make naturally fermented soda, which is so cool. So basically those same little microbes that are left, well, they're probably different microbes by the time they're in whey. No, because you can use whey as a starter. Same microbes. And I have mentioned previously, it is currently citrus season in Sacramento, which is a very, very wonderful time of the year here. A quick side note on that, I'm in a choir, and in choir we had rehearsal. We rehearse on Tuesday nights, and there are announcements in the middle of every choir rehearsal. And a thing that happens pretty frequently is people will bring in their excess fruit, which is this time of year is usually citrus. And so someone had a bunch of grapefruits. A couple of weeks ago, someone had a bunch of Meyer lemons, and the person who was doing the announcements was saying, okay, there are all of these grapefruits here, take as many as you want, and if they're all gone, then the person who brought them will bring back more next week. I love citrus season in Sacramento, and I don't even know this person who made this announcement, but my thought was, yes, I also love citrus season in Sacramento. It's a great time of year. There are so many citrus trees, and you just walk around our neighborhood, and it's like, ooh, I'll take some of these lemons, thank you. I'll take some of these tangelos, thank you. I'll take some of these mandarins, thank you. And we just end up with all of this citrus, and it's great. But so we have all of this citrus. We have this whey left over from the yogurt. And so you can find recipes. I'll post a link to a recipe that I found. I don't think it's actually the one we're using. But basically, you just get any kind of fruit juice and you add the whey to it, a small amount of whey, and the microbes in the whey will start eating the sugar and they will digest it and produce gas as a result, right? They release carbon dioxide. And that is the same process of, like, carbon dioxide is what is in bubble water. It's also what's in Coca-Cola, right? All the fizz, the bubbles, that's carbonation. That's because there is lots and lots of carbon dioxide inside the liquid. And so if you take this juice, so what we are doing, we juiced a bunch of mandarins because we had all of these free little, very sweet mandarin oranges. We juiced them and we boiled them. I'm saying we, Susie did this mostly because she is a magician of microbes. She's a magician in many ways, but one of them is microbes. Man, I'm really wife-guying out today. Anyway, so she juiced these mandarins and then also boiled them and boiled the peels so we get a little of the flavor from the peels, and then strained them and put them into a jar. And we put some whey in there. And so the whey is going to sort of eat some of that sugar and it's going to produce all this carbon dioxide. And for 2 days or so, we're supposed to just let it happen. And we have just a piece of cheesecloth over the lid of the jar because you need air to be able to go in and out. But after a couple days, we put it in a bottle and seal the bottle. And what ends up happening is the carbon dioxide keeps getting produced by the little microbes and the pressure builds up. And so then when you open it, you have bubbly, fizzy Mandarin soda. So we're making Mandarin soda. We'll see how it comes out. We sort of finished it and it was like, oh, there are some things that maybe we could do differently next time. And so there'll be a next time. Two tricky things I will tell you if you are planning to try this at home. 3 things I'll tell you if you're planning to try this at home. First one is, don't take my advice on how to do it. Like, do your research because this is the first time we've ever done it, and Susie is mostly the one who has been doing it. Actually, well, it's the first time we're doing it with whey. It's the second time we've done it. Last year we made cherry soda. Susie made cherry soda with cherries from our friend's cherry tree. Yeah, that's right. We have cherry trees too in Sacramento. We have lots of stone fruit also. That's a different time of year, but that's also great. That's in the spring. Anyway. The other 2 pieces of advice that I will give you are, 1, if you are doing this, when you put it in the sealed bottle and you make the sort of turning it into carbonated soda stage, you want to use a round bottle as opposed to like a square or even something with like decorative ridges, because glass bottles can explode if they have any sort of structural weaknesses, and the circle is the sturdiest shape. Right. The other piece of advice that I came across that seems good is if you're doing this, wrap a towel around the bottle because that way, if the bottle explodes, it is contained, because what you do not want is to have the bottle explode all over your house, or even worse, all over you and like be hit with glass shrapnel. That's a way to have a really bad time. So we are doing this, and hopefully in a couple of days, we'll have some homemade Mandarin soda, and I'll be able to share a picture or a video or something of what it looks like. But it is yet another way. Those are just 3 different ways in our house right now that we are enlisting the help of microbes to do amazing things and basically just make our lives a little more delicious. And I think that's really cool. We're going to take a quick break right in this moment, and we'll be right back.
Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe.
Yes, friends, thank you for being here. That is your reminder to hit the like button or the subscribe button. Leave a review or a comment depending on how you are consuming this. You can go to goodworld.love and you can get merch. You can get this shirt. You can get this mug that I have over here where I keep pens. Markers, they're markers. I have whiteboards around. Share this with your friends. Anything. I would really appreciate your help. You can go to Patreon. If you go to goodworld.love, there's a link to the Patreon, so you can go and support me on Patreon. Also, we are going to be doing at some point this month our first Patreon Zoom for Patreon members. I'm figuring out logistics on that, but I'm excited about that. We can actually chat a little bit in person. So that's an option that's out there. Okay, so why am I talking about microbes? Mostly because they're really cool, right? And I mentioned, so these are the 3 projects we have going on. We have yogurt, we have sourdough, and we have naturally fermented soda. But this same, it's not quite the same process, but variations on this process are used to make alcohol, right? It's how you make wine. It's how you make beer. And then if you take your beer and you distill it, that's how you make whiskey. It's how we make pickles. I gotta tell you, being a New York Jew, I love me some pickles. And this is how you make pickles. It's the same thing. You just let some good microbes grow. And you create, basically it's what you are effectively doing is you are creating a very, very small ecosystem, and you are managing that ecosystem to get it to grow the right kinds of things. You can imagine that maybe there's a super powerful alien race out there that is trying to grow humans for food. And so they have set up this ecosystem for us to propagate ourselves so that one day they can come and harvest us. I think that's probably not what's happening, but that could be real. Anything could be real. But you're creating this little ecosystem and you're just managing it to encourage the right things to grow. And for me, the first time I started thinking about this was I got into cheese making a few years ago, about 5 years ago now, before we moved from DC to California. I just realized, I really love cheese and I don't really know anything about the process of making cheese. Is it something I can do at home? Turns out it is something you can do at home. It is easier to make fresh cheeses, chev, goat cheese, or queso fresco is a fresh Mexican cheese. There are lots of cheeses that you can make. Paneer is another one where you don't need rennet. You can just use either the microbes that are already in the milk, or you can use lemon juice to curdle things. Basically, you need to take your milk and turn it into a curd. But for that to be durable, to last longer, you need rennet. And something I did not realize until I started doing this is that traditionally, rennet is an enzyme. And people are like, oh, it's an enzyme that is used to turn the milk into curd. What they don't say is that is the enzyme that naturally occurs inside the stomachs of mammals. And so for most of human history, in order to make cheese, you needed to get the stomach of a baby animal and use that, right? They think the way that cheese was originally, I don't know if you want to say invented or discovered, right? It's sort of originally a discovery and then people invented ways to refine it. But the thought is that maybe people were using camel stomachs as a way to transport liquids, including but not limited to milk. And maybe someone was transporting some milk in a camel stomach, and after a few days, they went to drink the milk and they were like, oh, this is kind of weird and gooey. What's going on with it? And then they tasted it and they were like, oh, that tastes good. And then eventually people figured out, okay, well, we can press it to make it more condensed, because the cheese curd, the fresh cheese curd, right when you make it, is kind of the consistency of tofu. If you have ever had silken tofu, it's very, very soft. And then if you're turning it into a hard cheese, you cut it and that sort of gives the whey an opportunity to come out, because it's very full of, part of why it's so soft is it's full of whey. It's saturated basically as though with water, but it's whey, which includes water, but it's not only water. And so you cut it and then you cook it, and that sort of dries out the curd, and then you can press it and all kinds of things. But when you are making cheese, oh, I should also add, so for most of human history, you have needed to use an animal stomach It's the same if you've ever heard like, oh, milk turns into a solid inside your stomach. Like that's actually what's going on. There is rennet that lives in your stomach or something rennet adjacent, I guess, that turns the milk into something kind of solid. And that is the same process of how we make cheese. We take these enzymes, these little goobers, and we mix them into the milk, and they curdle the milk, and then we do things to the milk to turn it into cheese. We add, and this again is coming back to different kinds of microbes. If you're making blue cheese, you add a certain kind of mold. It's usually penicillium, which is the same mold that is penicillin, that cures so many infections that people have. There are lots of other things. If you're making a cheddar, you'll add certain kinds of microbes. There are different cultures that you will have that will produce different flavors. I will also add that these days you don't need to use rennet from a slaughtered baby animal. Now we have microbial rennet, where scientists have figured out how to use microbes so that they secrete rennet, and we can end up with really high quality, semi-soft and hard cheeses that are actually vegetarian, right? Part of what this means is that while we think of cheese as a vegetarian product, a lot of cheese currently, and all cheese historically, was not actually vegetarian because it required killing a baby animal to make it. But now that is no longer the case, and that's nice. So you take the rennet and you're just like, okay, what kind of little milk ecosystem do I want to make with this cheese? Do I want to make a blue cheese? Do I want to make something else? And then you're putting it in a mold, and effectively what happens is the outside of it kind of hardens. You can use salt to do that. You can use wax to do that, which is why some cheeses have wax around them. But basically it's something to keep the inside of your little milk cheese ecosystem from getting contaminated by whatever stuff is just floating around in the air, right? You don't want that happening. That's how you get really, really sick. And so you're just cultivating your little ecosystem, and then eventually you're like, okay, my ecosystem's ready to eat. And so much that we do is just cultivating a little ecosystem so that our food is a little more delicious. Mustard also comes from fermentation. I will also say, man, growing up, I always thought that when I heard mustard, I only thought of ballpark mustard, right? Like bright yellow mustard. There are lots of other kinds of mustard, and honestly, they are better. Ketchup, same thing. Ketchup is also from fermentation. You just use some microbes and give them an ecosystem where they're eating tomatoes, and you end up with ketchup. Sauerkraut. Also, for a long time, I thought sauerkraut was just like the weird stuff that New York City hot dog vendors put on hot dogs, which is like it's kind of bland and a little like gross and soggy. Real sauerkraut is also great. All of this stuff is great. And all of this is just humans have, over the course of thousands of years, far longer than we have been writing down our history, humans have been figuring out how to do these things without even really knowing that microbes exist, right? Like now we know, oh, okay, there are little microbes that live in the milk, and so that's how we get yogurt. There are little microbes that live in the air, and so that's how we can make bread. And because we can't see them, people didn't know that they existed until probably the 19th century. I'm going to wildly speculate. But humans are so incredibly innovative. And that's really at the heart of what I want to say here, is we are so innovative. We have figured out all of these different ways to be like, wow, nature does some cool things. I bet I can use those cool things that nature does to make my food a little more delicious. And it is common for us to think about technology only in the sense of like this technology, for example, that I'm using to talk to you and that you're using to watch it, right? We're thinking of electronic devices and transistors and the internet and things that enable the coding and transmitting of information. And I don't want to say that that's not cool, because it is pretty cool, and a lot of it is really cool. But also, we are surrounded by all of these things that are just natural processes that are also amazing. Like your skin is self-healing. Your computer is not self-healing. Nature is full of incredible processes that just kind of work in ways that are incredibly beneficial to us. And we take that very much for granted because we're born into it. And it's just like, yeah, why should I be amazed by mustard? Mustard has been there my entire life. But like mustard is really cool. Cheese is really cool. a naturally fermented Mandarin soda. It's just really cool that you can take these things that exist in nature and just combine them and be like, oh, this is extra delicious. Thank you, generations and generations and generations of ancestors, for figuring out how to do this so that I'm here getting to enjoy this soda or enjoy this yogurt or enjoy this sourdough. So really, my message for you today is just that nature is really cool on a lot of different levels. A phrase that I like to use is that the world is bottomlessly wondrous in every direction, right? Like we sort of have the directions that we are often taught to think about, technology, like computers and technology being one example. But if you just want to look at microbes, you can go so deep just learning about microbes. And then within microbes, you can look at mustard, you can look at ketchup, you can look at cheese. And every one of these things has thousands of different ways of doing it that have been developed over time, usually by different people in different regions, right? Wine is going to be a more culturally familiar one to my audience, right? There's Napa is about an hour away from where I live in California. Sonoma's a little farther. But there are also wine growing regions up in the Sierra foothills that grow different kinds of grapes. In Europe, there are French wines and there are Italian wines and there are Spanish wines and German wines. There are all these different wines, Portuguese wines, Greek wines, Croatian wines, Slovenian wines. I used to work with a guy. I had a friend, we've lost touch, who is Slovenian, and he taught me about the existence of Slovenian wine because people in all these different places for a lot of human history sort of traded goods, and then they also traded knowledge. And so someone at some point was like, hey, we figured out how to take these grapes and grow them and do this really interesting thing that makes this really delicious beverage that sort of makes you feel funny and feel fun. To sort of describe drunkenness in a certain way. It also causes you to lose control in certain ways, and it can be very unhealthy. So I'm not trying to tell everyone to get drunk, but I think it's not new information that a lot of people throughout history have had a lot of wine to drink, right? And so all these different cultures said, oh, okay, well, let's take that knowledge. Let's try growing grapes here. Well, those grapes over there didn't make it, but these ones did. So let's try to keep growing these. And over time, they end up with different kinds of grapes, which produce different kinds of wine. And then they also figure out, oh, actually, there are different things we can do with the wine, right? In more Nordic countries, you get ice wine, which is I don't know very much about it, but it's like a different process and a different kind of grape. And it is just a history of people exchanging knowledge and then adapting that knowledge to their own circumstances. And so you also get beer. Beer has had a very similar process too. And someone at some point was like, well, what if we put the beer over a fire and we caught the fumes from it? And that's how we got whiskey. I don't know if maybe they started with that, or maybe people were already doing it with wine. I honestly don't know. There's too much to learn. And that's sort of what I'm talking about, right? You can be like, okay, I'm going to learn about microbes. Well, okay, within microbes, I'm going to learn about booze. Well, okay, within booze, I'm going to learn about wine. Okay, well, within wine, I'm going to learn about unfortified wine, which is just like wine that hasn't been distilled and had any harder alcohol added to it. And within unfortified wine, I'm going to learn about French wine. And then within French wine, I'm going to learn about French white wine. And then within French white wine, I'm going to learn about French white wine from a particular region in France. Chardonnay, I'm sure, is a place. I'm sure that's where the Chardonnay grape gets its name, right? That is one type of white wine. There are many others. I think you see what I'm getting at. You can go incredibly deep. The world is bottomlessly full of wonders in every direction. And I think all of us are best served when we are taking a moment to appreciate that. We don't have to take a ton of time. We don't have to take the, half hour or so that I've been recording to every single time we want to appreciate things. But if 10 seconds, right? Just take 10 seconds to sort of look at your food and think about where it comes from, because it's amazing. I've talked plenty about the Plum Village Buddhist tradition, right? And I've spent time at Deer Park Monastery in Southern California. And they have a practice where there are 5 different, they call them 5 contemplations before eating. And I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but the first one is, this food is the gift of the entire universe. The earth, the sky, numerous living beings, and much hard and loving work. And they say that before pretty much every meal. And then there are 4 others that I don't have memorized. I'll link to them. But the point of this is, whatever you're eating, if you're eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right, and you're eating it on plain old sliced white bread that you got at the Safeway, that white bread still is a product of the earth, the sky, and numerous living beings and much hard and loving work, right? The grain that goes into the flour is grown from the earth. That's not a thing that someone's making in a lab. It's not something being made with a computer. It is grown outside. There are computers probably helping to manage the planting, particularly if we're talking about like an industrialized product like Wonder Bread. But it still ultimately is wheat growing from the ground that has been milled into flour. So it's coming from the earth. The wheat needed the rain from the sky. It needed the rays from the sun to grow. It needed the dirt and the nutrients in the dirt to grow. That's just the bread. That's not even getting into the peanuts and the jelly, which have their own versions of that. And all 3 of those things have had a lot of people involved. You know, if you're talking about an industrial process again, if you're looking at Wonder Bread and Jif peanut butter and Smucker's jelly, I am not sponsored by any of these organizations, by the way, and they're generally not my own preferred bread and peanut butter and jelly, but if you eat them, that's fine. But those are like all of the learning to develop the technology of industrialization is a lot of hard and loving work that has been done by people. All of the work in the factory, some of it is done by machines. A lot of it is still done by people for all of those things. There are so many people whose work goes into producing your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so your peanut butter and jelly sandwich is an incredible combination of the earth, the sky, numerous living beings, right? Which is just the grapes in your jelly, or whatever kind of jelly you're eating, whatever fruit it was, that was from a living being. The peanut butter, peanuts are from a living being. The bread is from wheat and yeast, which are living beings, as well as all the people who are putting in all the work to make those things. And so at the Plum Village monasteries, they sit down and they just take a minute to look at their food and to think about, wow, what are the things that went into this? There are so many things that went into this. This incredibly simple, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. What is more simple than that? So many things went into it. So much life. So many generations of innovation. So much work by people who are no longer alive, and so much work by people who are still alive, still doing that work. That is an incredible thing. And again, we often take it for granted because we're just like, yeah, it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I grew up eating that. That's what I had every day in kindergarten. Everyone has peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Yes, they do. And that's incredible. So that is my takeaway for today. It is all incredible. And I would just encourage you, when you get the moment, when you come across any of it, to just take a moment to think about how incredible it is and to identify the different, not even all of, but some of the different ways that it's incredible, right? If you can look at bread and just go, wow, that used to be wheat. And people figured out how to turn grass, right? Wheat is a kind of grass. People figured out how to turn grass into this. That's cool. It's just really cool. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to do anything with that. Just appreciating that can help you get through everything else you're dealing with. I'm not saying it's going to get you through, and I'm not saying that challenges aren't enormous. I'm just saying this is a little practice that doesn't take very long and can help. It can just help ground you and connect you to everything that is around us and how incredible it is. This is the good world, right? We live in the good world, what I call the good world. Something I was thinking about recently, I did an episode late 2024 about the idea of the parable of the mustard seed, right? Jesus talked about the kingdom of God is a mustard seed, which starts as a really tiny seed and turns into a giant tree. And I talked about living in California, sort of the idea of the parable of the redwood seed, because redwood seeds are super, super tiny. I would say I have one right here. You're not even going to be able to see it. It's on my thumb. Yeah, it's like a little dot. It just fell. It's fine. I have others. Redwood seeds are super tiny. They grow into enormous trees, right? Trees that are so tall you cannot see the top of them. That's an incredible thing. And when Jesus was talking about the kingdom of God is in a mustard seed, I frankly feel pretty confident that he was not saying, oh, the kingdom of God is this magical place that we're going to get to and it's full of mustard trees. I think it was a challenge to say, hey, you live in the kingdom of God. Can you even recognize it when it's right in front of your face? We live in the kingdom of God. We live in an incredible world, bottomlessly full of wonders in every direction. Can we just recognize that? Can we appreciate what is right in front of our face? We're going to end there today. Well, thank you, friend, for your visit today. Now it's time we both go on our way. The world will still be insane tomorrow, but don't let that fill your heart with sorrow. You can thrive in a desert, just ask a saguaro. Please give to my Patreon. Capitalism is fun. Let's build a world that is good. This is a show for adults. Bye, friends. Thank you.